Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for your quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're examining how the largest companies in America are achieving record sales and profits, all with fewer workers. Collective data from the 2026 Fortune 500, which ranks the largest public U.S. companies by revenue, shows continued strong growth from these giant companies, and one metric that surprisingly has dropped. Together, the companies on the list generated record revenue of $21 trillion. That's up 5% from a year ago. And their total profits ballooned 12% to $2.1 trillion. Their overall market cap surged 19% to $55 trillion. And that's in a fiscal year fueled by outsized AI spending and hype around the new technologies. But one data point did not continue with a similar relentless upward path. The Fortune 500's total headcount decreased for the second straight year to 30.5 million employees. That's down 1% from last year. That's a loss of about 301,000 workers. Fortune 500 headcount had declined before, but since 1995, when the Fortune 500 incorporated service firms for the first time, a downward trend in overall employment has only taken place during or right after a recession. So what's behind the unusual drop in employees? Well, for 2026, the answer lies, at least in part, in which companies who have left the list. The Fortune 500 is the sum of its parts, so its overall headcount fluctuates as companies join the list and then drop off the rankings. And a major blow to the 2026 list in terms of headcount was the departure of the Walgreens Boots Alliance. That's the pharmacy chain, which fell out of the Fortune 500 after being acquired by private equity firm Sycamore Partners in August of 2025. Last year, Walgreens employed 252,000 people, landing it among the top 25 biggest employers on the 2025 list. A second labor-heavy retailer, Nordstrom, also fell off the list because they went private. They employ about 41,000 people. So collectively, about 660,000 people worked at the 22 companies that departed the Fortune 500 list last year. And the 22 companies that replaced the drop-off, well, they employed fewer than half that amount, about 317,000. The largest employer among the new companies is called Amentum Holdings. They're a Virginia-based engineering and tech services company with a headcount of about 50,000. And they're followed by Medline, which is an Illinois-based healthcare supply business that employs 45,000. Headcount growth among the carryover firms offset to a small degree the headcount declines caused by the changes to the membership of the 500. In total, the firms that remained on the list from 2025 to 2026 added about 41,000 employees. Dick's Sporting Goods recorded one of the biggest jumps in headcount. Its staffing increased by 83%, or over 31,000 employees, because it acquired Foot Locker back in September. Carvana was another company with a big headcount growth. The online used car seller added 5,700 employees. That's about a 33% increase, as it continued an impressive comeback after some years of struggling. But for a group of companies that collectively employ tens of millions of people, employment among incumbent firms was really remarkably stable, growing only 0.1%. That's essentially flat. That reflects the low hire, low fire economy that economists have used to describe the current state of very flat labor markets. And this data shows the continuance of a decades-long trend, and this math is pretty stark. Fortune 500 companies are earning more revenue per employee at about $687,000 and more profit per employee, about $69,000, than ever before. And over that same period, inflation-adjusted wages for employees have stayed pretty flat. It's also worth noting that the results at the very top of the Fortune 500 list are very interesting too. Amazon, who's the number one company on the 2026 list, added about 20,000 employees last year. That's about a 1.3% increase. Headcount at number 2, Walmart, was flat on the year. And number 3, the United Health Group, their employment dipped by about 10,000 employees. Taken together then, the 3 largest public companies in America by revenue increased their combined workforce by only about 10,000 employees in the last year. That's remarkable when you consider the scale and success of these businesses. None of these developments, though, are negative on their surface. Higher productivity is one of the primary drivers of rising living standards over the long run. And companies that become more efficient can invest more, innovate faster, and compete more effectively around the world. The challenge isn't that productivity is increasing. The challenge is ensuring that the benefits of that productivity gain are broadly shared with the people whose work helps to create them. So all this data raises an obvious question. How can companies generate record sales and record profits without hiring significantly more people? The first thing to understand is that this disconnect between business growth and employment isn't necessarily the results of companies simply choosing not to hire. Instead, it's the product of several long-term changes in how modern businesses operate. Perhaps the biggest factor is technology. Today's workers have access to automation, artificial intelligence, integrated enterprise software tools, and digital tools that allow each employee to accomplish far more than was possible just a decade or two ago. A salesperson can manage more customer accounts. A finance team can process way more transactions. Customer service reps can resolve more issues with the help of AI. In economic terms, output per employee continues to rise, allowing companies to generate more revenue without needing to add the same number of workers. The second factor is the changing nature of what many large companies actually produce and sell. Increasingly, America's most valuable businesses generate their revenue from software, cloud computing, digital advertising, subscription services, and other products that scale almost infinitely. Once these platforms are built, serving thousands or even millions of additional customers often requires very few additional employees. That creates tremendous operating leverage where revenue and profits can grow much faster than headcounts. And finally, it's important to recognize that many companies haven't necessarily reduced the amount of work being done. They've simply changed who performs it. Instead of hiring full-time employees, organizations increasingly rely on contractors, consulting firms, managed service providers, offshore teams, and gig workers. In other words, payroll headcount may remain flat or even reduce, while the total amount of labor supporting the business continues to expand. Taken together, these forces help explain why many of today's largest companies can report record sales and record profits while employing roughly the same number of people, or in some cases even fewer. It represents a fundamental shift in the relationship between business growth and job growth, one that's reshaping both the labor market and the expectations workers have about what economic success should mean for them. For much of the 20th century, business growth and job growth tended to move together. Today's business growth is increasingly driven by productivity growth instead. For business leaders, this is a reminder that workforce strategy is no longer simply about adding headcount to support growth. It's increasingly about helping employees become more productive through technology, better processes, and new skills. But investing in employee development can't be an afterthought in today's economy in the AI era. And for HR leaders, these challenges perhaps are even greater. As AI and automation continue to increase productivity, organizations will have to think carefully about how those gains are reflected in employee opportunity, in career growth, in compensation, and in trust. Because if workers begin to believe that every productivity gain simply results in higher profits for the company and fewer jobs, maintaining engagement and confidence in the future of work becomes much more difficult. And that's an important distinction because it changes the implicit social contract between employers and workers. If companies can continue expanding without adding many employees, then the central workplace question becomes not just how many jobs will AI eliminate, but rather who benefits when productivity grows faster than employment. And that broader question is likely to become one of the defining workforce debates of the AI era. That's it for the show today. A big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. Be sure to subscribe to the HR Happy Hour Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.